today, July 16th, 2019. We're in the LaFleur County Courthouse in the office of Robert Collin, who is a supervisor here in LaFleur County. This is an oral history project. Legal Services, Mr. Jordan just informed me, has been around for 53 years. I had said 50. With me, of course, we're speaking with Mr. Senator and City Council Person David Jordan. With me on the staff side, Jenny Gilgore and Morgan Cotarini. The young students are Justin Gary, Ryan Parrish, Caleb Hall, Dylan McKellar, Dayton Shigard, Alexis Miller, and Sierra Tucker. Mr. Senator, City Council Jordan, I mean, there's a long persona. You mentioned the book that I need to read. You've been in the legislature a number of years. You've been a city council person a number of years. You've been an activist for many, many years. We're going to get to some of that, but before we get to that, for the purpose of our history and for the purpose of the record, for the purpose of the future, I want to know a little something about David Jordan, for the record. Who is David Jordan? Where was he born? Where did he grow up? Something about his sibling. So just start with the beginning. Tell us a little bit.
Well, I started to say son of a beggar, but I'm the son of a sharecropper, Cleveland, Jordan. It was 7 of us, my mother, my father, and 5 siblings, and I'm the youngest of that 5. And I was born in the 30s, and we sharecropped 4 miles south of Greenwood here, and I would walk to high school here when I got to be 8th grade, I think. And other than that, I went to schools that the Rolling Wall family, they didn't have schools on the plantation at that time for African Americans. So there was a Jewish family from up north, I believe they call it Rollingwall family, that gave money to southern states to have schools for African Americans. So they were able to establish a building a little longer than this and made it a little wider too. And they put petition between it, and from, we call it pre-primary, now it's kindergarten. Right. From kindergarten through the 6th grade would have one section, and on the other side, 7th and 8th grade, and that was it.
You mentioned sharecrop. You know, a lot of people in this generation and maybe future generation don't know what sharecrop is or sharecropping. Would you explain to?
Yes, it's kind of like, if you've studied any kind of history, it's kind of similar to the feudal system that England had at one time. Sharecropping is supposed to be 50-50 deal, but if we made 40 bales of cotton one year and the person who owned the plantation got 20, all of the seeds, all of the fertilizer, all of the expense came out of our 20 bales. And then plus interest on everything. So we paid for the crop to be made. And so therefore, sometimes we'd clear some money. Highest we ever gotten, we call it clear without tax, that went to my dad and our family was $2,000. But there was something else involved. There was, in March, you start getting, wasn't food stamps, you start getting a little coupon book or cash on your crop that you're gonna make. You would get that amount of money twice a month. We call it limited. I don't know where that name came from, what it means, but we got it twice a month. Every 2 weeks, we could go to that commissary and get that book and get stuff out of that store twice a month. That ended the 1st of August, because when cotton started opening, then you could get you pick so many bales of cotton, then you could get something you call seed money. And that seed money would be $15 or $16 per bale, depending on how much cotton was worth at that time. Cotton was $200 a bale on the market. Then we could get more money out of the seed money. So we'd pick 3 bales a week. So that would mean $30 to $40 we'd have for the family to live off. But if it rained a whole week like it's doing out there now, we got $0. and that's when we had the hard time during the harvesting season. And we wouldn't have any, we'd have to, well, we had potatoes. We grew potatoes, peanuts, and watermelons, and all those good things, and all kind of vegetables. And we had hogs, and we had 2 cows.
So you're basically self-sufficient.
Along those lines, yeah. When you want to get something from the store, from the market, then you wouldn't have any resources if it rained a whole week to get that. At that time, I recall, the tax system now is in meals, when you pay tax by meals, but we call it a token. It took 10 tokens or 10 meals to equal to a penny, okay? And people would throw them away, or you'd find them lying around, and you'd gather your 10 tokens, as we call them. Then you could go to the store with a penny, you could get 2 suckers, 2 little boxes of kisses. And so growing up, all of that was part.
You mentioned you grew up in the 30s, so that meant your father and mother had been, obviously, came from another generation. There was a major flood that took place in
27.
27. Were your parents involved in that, and did they ever talk to you about what that was like?
Well, they was in Lexington. They came from Holmes County, Jason County, and I think they told me that they came in 28. In 28 on the Whitterton plantation, but there's a lot of history about that. The Whittertons had a brother who was a relative, a member of the family who was a congressman at that time, and all of the land around Greenwood would flood in 27. Everything flooded. I've seen floods in Greenwood. I've seen floods on the plantation 4 miles south of Greenwood, but at that time, the Whitterton in Washington would buy up all of the land around that flooded land. He'd buy it up. Then later on, when the federal government put the levee system up, so keep the water off of the land, then he owned all of it and he leased it to everybody else. So the Whitterton became pretty well one of the wealthiest families in Greenwood. The Mississippi Delta, to say.
You mentioned Rosenwald schools, and I'm familiar with Rosenwald School as well, up in Marshall County, and you're right, it involved Rosenwald. It was part of the Seals legacy out of Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
So your parents, what level did they reach in school, your mom?
I think my mother's maybe in 3rd grade, my dad's 2nd. But my dad, a strange thing about him, he couldn't read much of any other book, but he could read the Bible. He had a good memory. He could remember stuff. My mother, of course, used to write letters, but neither one of them got any basic education of any significance.
Now, in terms of you all, how did they encourage you? Since they didn't have any formal education, but they encouraged you all. You mentioned chemistry, being a chemistry major. What about your siblings? Did all you all go to college and finish high school?
Yes. 3 of us went to college out of 5. The older brothers, one went to the World War II, and he came back, and he left and went to spend the rest of his life in Toledo. Then I had one brother who had some retardation, and he was not able to learn anything much, but certain basic things he could learn, but he could not. Somehow, unfortunately, he was not able to learn to get out of
all of our families have
grade
that.
school, hardly. So 3 of us, my sister who's still alive, and my other brother who's deceased now, and me being the youngest one, I'm still alive. So all 3 of us got college education. Well, I have a master's degree in chemistry, University of Wyoming, and done studies in other places across the country. When the Russians put the Sputnik up,
Yes,
then all science teachers won scholarships.
Exactly, my sister was involved.
I couldn't go to Ole Miss. They wouldn't allow me to go there. They wouldn't accept.
I'm glad you mentioned that. You couldn't go to Ole Miss, and we're going to get to some other stuff.
Okay.
But you couldn't go to Ole Miss. How did you feel, being that you had ability as a student, and you could not go to a school.
Well, this
in
is a
your own
graduate student. I had been teaching, but when the Russians put the Sputnik up, then NSF, National Science Foundation, gave scholarships to science teachers who could qualify all around the country. So I applied to Ole Miss, and they rejected me and said that they didn't accept students from Valley State. I'm an undergrad from Valley State. So I wrote Kansas State College of Pittsburgh, and they gave me a scholarship there. And when I went to Kansas State in Pittsburgh, Kansas, then the next year I got a sequential to the University of Wyoming leading to a master's degree in chemistry. And I used Kansas State University Graduate School. But I had problems because they called Ole Miss and they wanted to know why they wouldn't accept me there. They said, we don't accept students from Valley State. And they had some question of whether they would let me into their graduate school. And came to the professors, they said, well, if your own state won't accept you in their graduate school, then I'm not sure I can allow you into our graduate school. I said, what? He said, well, but I'll check and see what I can do. So they called down in Mississippi from Kansas, and they didn't allow it. But then they said, well, I don't care what Mississippi does, we're going to allow you in our graduate school. And they accept me in our graduate school. And I think we were doing titration that day, don't know about chemistry. And you could have heard me in the back of that lab, glad to get it accepted in their graduate school. And so from that point, I used Kansas to get into the University of Wyoming, which led to a master's degree in chemistry. In fact, 50 years ago today, I was taking my comps when the man was on the moon, and I got some questions about that and went way out there. And 3 professors looking at me. I had a time getting back, but I finished my comps there and got a degree 50 years ago, an advanced degree.
I can relate to those comps.
So that's how that happened. Then I went on from there to University of Texas, Dillard University in New Orleans, and Tuskegee Institute in Alabama.
So education has been really much a part of your life. So who would you say in terms of that? Did that just come from yourself, or who gave you that drive to pursue that education route? Is there any one person?
Long rows of cotton and sizzling heat. I was running from the cotton field.
But a lot of people were Chicago. You didn't.
I didn't have the bus fare. I never wanted to leave Mississippi because actually, as a young child, as a young boy, I worked at a store. We would go to the field 5:30 in the morning before sunup. We'd pick cotton all day until sundown. But I got a job working at a Maloof store. This was some Sears had a store there, a variety store, and I'd go there and work till 9 o'clock at night. And the Maloof had a lot to do with training me in business and stuff like that. So I learned, and I worked there. And I had some bad experiences there. They sold illegal whiskey. Whiskey was not legalized then. It was illegal, but they got it from Tallulah, Louisiana by trucks. They would go down.
That was during Prohibition?
Huh?
Was that during Prohibition? This supposed to be a dry county?
Yeah.
Okay.
But the people were staggering to the... so I wasn't going to school, but 4 months. Usually we'd finish after Thanksgiving and start school the 1st of December after we settled. That's when we got some money to buy 1 pair of shoes, high top shoes, and a jumper and some overalls with suspenders to them. And they call it dental now, dental kind of stuff like you got on there. And we get that, and school started the 1st of December. And school was out April the 15th. So I got about 4 months, 4.5 months of schooling.
That was split session, they called it, right?
No, that was not the split session. Okay. That was the full session.
Okay.
So the split session came later, and that's when you work 7 and 2, which you got your 9 months, but you worked 7 and 2. This was all we got. You couldn't go. the school on the plantation didn't begin until all the cotton was out of the field. Okay, you had to harvest all the cotton off the field. And then sometime the Whittertons would go deer hunting and they'll stay away 2 weeks and all the cotton harvest, and we'd be waiting for them to come and sell it with us, we called it. Then we could get some clothes to go to school.
If you had to explain to a young generation before we move on and talk about legal services, how would you explain the fact that agriculture seemed to have taken complete precedence over the education of black kids, particularly in the Delta? What was the rationale for that?
Well, life for a black person was not significant to white people. They just didn't think it was important. They'd call, as I was saying, I was a boy, 13 years old. I was working in the store and I was going to school 4 months. Some farmers didn't like that. They would sit around the store, and when I come in with my book satchel, they'd say, "Why don't you? I need that nigga as a tractor driver." Now I'm about 12, 13 years. I'd make a tractor driver of that nigga, and he going to school. That's what they would say to the Maloofs about me. And so they would be sitting around drinking. And so one day, this person owned the plantation. He came out, he had a convertible Paco. That's a vehicle they don't make anymore, I don't believe it. He had another person driving him, white fellow. And I ran out to wait on him. He said, "You that smart SOB," but he used the term. I'm 13 years old. I'm going out to wait on him. And he told the guy that was driving, say, "Get out and teach this black SOB a lesson." They were angry because I was going to school 4 months. He got out and he struck me in the face 8 or 9 times. And I was crying. And then after that, everybody in the store, all blacks around there, was laughing at me crying. Then I had to still go in the store and get a Coca-Cola because they had a bottle between them where they was drinking and bring it out. And the Coca-Cola was a nickel. And he gave me the nickel, and they left laughing at me, crying. And that broke my heart. I was 13. I said, if I ever, that's one reason I leave Mississippi. I said, I'm going to do something about it. I'm going to get even with these folks. They are not, I'm going to somehow, some way, I'm going to get these folks. I can't use it. I could curse then, but I can't use the language here that I use. But they didn't hear it. I used it with my peers. But that was one incident. Then another incident that kept me in Mississippi as well was I saw a black man kicked down to the ground for touching a car. See, they sold liquor, and black people would come there on Saturday from different plantations, and they would buy a half a pint and go around behind the tractor shed in a little shed, and they'd drink and they'd talk. It was $1 a quarter. The liquor was called Monroe. Half a pint of Monroe, $1 a quarter. They put the money together. And they bought, that Saturday, bought 3 or 4. And somebody one of the men got high. But his wife and his children was out there sitting at the store. They were eating too because that'd be an all-day thing at the store, eating different goodies. So when they got ready to go, he was drunk, and they was trying to hold him up. How many of you know what a croaker sack is? A netty, like brown netty sack. So they had the grocery divided in 3 different croaker sacks. 2 children had one, the wife had one. And the wife was holding him up. I had waited on a car on the side, had a tray on it, and a white couple. And they looked through, and this guy just touched the back of his car like I'm touching his table. He got out, he kicked that man down to the ground, and the children was crying, "Don't kill my dad, don't kill my dad, please, boy, don't kill him." It's just kicking them all in the stomach every way. He said, "I'm sorry, boss, but everybody was hollering. The wife and the 2 children asked me not to kill her dad. The wife said, "Don't kill my husband, please." And then he went in the store, the man that was doing this to the black man, and asked Maloof to give him a gun so he could kill the SOB, but he used the word. In the meantime, they were struggling, trying to get away, and they ran with him running. They didn't run in the road, they ran across the field, across the cotton field, which were behind the store, and they spilled all of that weekly grocery. And after the man couldn't get the gun from Maloof, he left. They came back and tried to retrieve all of the stuff that they had lost. And I saw all of that. And they were crying. And they lost their lard. How many of you know what lard, L-A-R-D, 4 pounds of Swift lard? They lost all of that stuff. And I said then, those two things, the reason I didn't want to leave Mississippi. So I was ready to do whatever was necessary. And then as I got into high school, 11th grade, I was asked to make a speech, and I chose to speak on the Topeka, Kansas, separate but unequal, that the U.S. Supreme Court ruled in the Topeka, Kansas case. And I spoke so emotional about it, and nobody understood, but I never did tell anybody in the city why I was emotional about it, but those two incidents were one. So when I finished high school, I had no money to go to college, but I got a dishwashing job and worked my way up and went to Valley and majored in science. And by the way, Morgan Freeman and I were classmates. So from that on, and when legal service, Richard Nixon established legal services, whenever they needed a voice, then I organized the Voters League, which...
What year did you organize? No,
66.
66. And Skip was much later than you in Marshall County in organizing the
Yeah,
Voters League.
Skip.
But you organized one of the first in the state, right?
Yeah. And the only one left now.
Tell us a little bit about that. I know about the incidents that triggers at that, but what was that like, organizing the league before you?
Well, I was a young teacher and was not afraid. Let me back up a little. In 63, automation came to the Mississippi Delta, the cotton picker. And people could not leave Greenwood to go out to pick cotton to make enough money to hold them over to the spring. And on the plantations, the plantation owner told the people they had to move, that he didn't need them anymore. So in order they didn't have anywhere to go, and they told me, we don't have anywhere to go. So they, well, I need my land, I need my house. But as soon as they left the house, they demolished the house. And so the people came to Greenwood, and they started to stay in with relatives, or anybody would take them in and try to get food stamps. But Bob Moses and Sam Block and Willie Peacock, who were leading Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, told them if you try to register to vote, then we cut off your food stamps. They call it commodities, and they did that. And people almost starved in 63. So when they started right downtown from the city hall, going downtown to the courthouse, to this coming here to register, they put dogs on them.
That happened before Birmingham, right?
Yeah, that was 63. In fact, Greenwood was the first place in the Deep South that they put dogs on people trying to register to vote. Well, that brought the national press in. And then the national press picked it up, and then everybody come, Medgar Evers, Aaron Henry from Clarksdale, Medgar Evers from Jackson, and local people. Then I decided, then 2 years later, to organize the Voters League. There had been one before my time, but only 40 people, when I went to court, only 40 people in this county that was African American was able to vote. Only 40 in federal court, that's in part of the record. So we started registering people. Then Richard Nixon, President Nixon organized, came up with the ideal legal service. That's one thing Dick Nixon did was good. And then it started spreading different places. And that's when I got involved. I was looking for a vehicle so that I could get my frustration out of my childhood. And every meeting they had, I attended, but I was teaching. I was teaching in Illinois, and people didn't know me that well because I was out of town. They didn't know where I worked, or they didn't know my name. So I attend each meeting. So I organized Greenwood Voters League and became its president.
And you all were involved in a series of suits, but before I ask you about those suits later on that you engaged in Greenwood, especially dealing with redistricting and voting and that sort of stuff, you mentioned Medgar Evers, you mentioned Dr. Henry, who had been NMRLS president, but Medgar before him. I know Medgar, of course, is older than you, and so is Dr. Henry, but did you know them personally?
Oh, I didn't know much about Medgar personally because Medgar Evers was killed in 63. And this was that summer after that winter had passed. Medgar was killed then. But now I knew Aaron. Aaron had been to the Voters League dozens of times.
And was he still in the Senate when you got to
he was in the House. Never was in the Senate.
Right,
he was
House.
a representative.
Right.
No, this happened
Before.
20 years, 15 years later. When I got, he was still there when I went.
Okay.
When I arrived in 93. I came in 93. Aaron had been there 4 or 5 years, maybe 8 years.
So with that legal services connection and all the stuff that happened to you as a boy, and the kind of passion that gave you, were you there to help with the structure or legal services, or what was your relationship with legal services at the beginning?
I was just a teacher.
Okay.
No teacher would take any position with civil rights because even your contract that you received from said superintendent that you were working for, you had to sign whether you're a member of the NAACP or any other organization, which didn't mean that because you're going to lie. If you were, you weren't going to tell him. So they had that on your contract. If you were, they were not going to accept you. So everybody said, no, no. So teachers had basic fears that they would lose their job if they would participate. But with my background and my father's background in civil rights, then I had no fear, and plus another advantage, I was working out of town. They wouldn't hire me here, even though I had a master's degree in chemistry. They wouldn't hire me until later. Okay? So I was working at Illinois, so they didn't know me, and they didn't know what I was doing. So I organized the Voters League, and then I got another job at Carrollton, and that's when we started meeting, and the Justice Department wanted to talk to me about different things that was happening, and had to put federal registers in Greenwood in this courthouse because the local people would not register blacks, even though the federal government say so. They wouldn't do it. They asked silly questions, how many bubbles in a bar of soap, and then the clerk couldn't read himself. He had a ninth grade, so he didn't know what was going on, but he thought he knew more than you knew. And he turned down some of my professors at Valley State who had master's degrees. They couldn't fill it out because the person who was the clerk didn't understand the language or resented them coming in the register. So we had all kind of problems there. So we set up throughout the county federal registers. A guy named Rosenberg, Jewish fellow, that I communicated with out of Washington and told him where to put different trails to get people to register.
You mentioned those early days again, getting involved, and you had no fear. But was there instances when people threatened you, or instances when they, did things to try to intimidate you and deter you from your involvement, even though you were in Indianola doing work here? But were there instances that you can say?
Not at that time, because I wasn't a threat to anybody. I was not a threat to anyone. I was just somebody in the black community with a black organization. They had a civic league. I was the president of the Voters League. We had no elected officials. We was trying to get blacks to register. Wasn't many registered. With SNCC, after the dogs were put on Reverend Tucker downtown, then we had 4 organizations here: SNCC, CORE, Congress of Racial Equality, SLC, Dr. King Organization, SLC, and we had the NAACP. They housed in the black community. Okay, now, one time they burned the office down, one Sunday evening. Then, I wish I had my book, but I got pictures of all of it. And the next time, they came after the office people after sundown, and one person, Travis, was shot in the neck, and he had to go to Valley State, and they airlifted him to Jackson to save him. And one time they ran from that place to my home, since they knew I was president of the Voters League, and this was Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, and they ran in there. Okay, and we put out the lights, and the Klans, whoever after, kept on by. But it was a lot of violence at that time. Now, Legal Services came in a little later. Legal Services came in. It was on Johnson Street here with Applin, Chambers, and 2 or 3 more. And then Lou Mize was up at Oxford. He was kind of the director. And then Solomon Osmond came, and then Willie Perkin and Alex Sanders, and all of those.
And so what were your interaction with those people?
Well,
you were the community
I
organizer.
was president of the Voters League.
Okay.
So, and a teacher at that time in the school system here. And then they started using me to go to court. Well, they put me, since I had a master's degree in science, they wouldn't let me go to the high school. This was in '73. So they put me in a junior high school, but I taught Cambridge Valley during the summer. So they used me whenever we get ready to go to court. Then they would subpoena me to go, and I'd show the subpoena to the principal. He says, "Mr. Jordan, you're welcome to go. I ain't gonna have the federal government on my back. This is an integrated school." So I could go and testify. Then we end up in district court under Judge William C. Cady of Greenville. And Judge Cady had compassion on what we were trying to do. And whatever the case were, he ruled in our favor, because I told my story like I'm telling it now, and he knew I was not bragging that I was educated and that I just wanted change. And I put it that I just want African American to have the same privileges as anybody else. And the judge, I could tell it was kind of a compassionate thing to him, and he would rule in our favor on several cases. My first time in court was from Britain, little guy. I can't think of his name now. It could have been Britain.
John Britton?
John Britton, yeah, had me to testify. And my first time in any court.
Now, you busted over the case concerning the at-large seats here in Greenwood. Were you the plaintiff in that case?
I sued everybody because I was angry, I sued everybody I had to. They got voting machines, and the people that know how to use them, so I sued the county right here that we not use them until we got training, people adequate trained for. Then Valley State folks, wouldn't let them register, so I sued them. And then uh, to change the former city government in Greenwood, I sued. That's David Jordan versus Greenwood. Sued to change the new form of government from a at-large system to a ward system. The office that Benny Thompson has, David Jordan versus Winters. That's my friend. I sued the state for that. So those are the major lawsuits. So I've testified in many others, but those were the major ones. Suing the voter supervisor and allowing for not allowing us. They just brought voting machines in and just put them up there to try to stay in office. So we sued them, took them to court, took them up to Aberdeen, in fact. Took them to Aberdeen up there. We won that. And then they had to give us time to do that.
You know, you're a chemistry major, but given that you have a propensity for lawsuits, was there ever a desire on your part to be a lawyer?
No, not really. My background, I was angry with the system for what I had seen happen to my people. That's the only reason I'm serving today. If I want to make money, I'd do nothing. But I'm in the Senate because I want to serve people.
Which remind me, you know, you in the Senate, which is a different animal from your activist. So how was that transition? How did you make that transition from being, you know, activist to city council government position to being an activist to be a senator? You made the transition. What triggered that?
The best way to be a good politician, in my philosophy, is to major in chemistry, because chemistry teachers think. You know, we got the young people here. Education is the way up and out. No one can push you up a ladder unless you're willing to climb. So if you want to do something in life, you got to, it's a struggle. It is a struggle. And you're going to run into consequences and hard time, but perseverance. I wrote the character education bill, and I put all these different traits in there. It's not easy. If everything's easy for you, you won't be worth anything. I got a bunch of cats I feed. A mouse could run across them. They wouldn't wake up to get it because they're fat. But if you have to struggle for something, it makes you tough. It's a development kind of thing, the struggle. So I was angry and because of my bringing up. I was angry and I wanted to see black people get privileges. Because, you know, I learned about Paul Dunbar, and I learned about all of the black writers. And I learned about Black Man Burden, by this lady wrote that. And I remember speeches that we watered this land with our tears and made it rich with our bone. 247 years of free labor. And then somebody had the audacity to tell me that I don't equal to something. And then look at their structure and look at my structure. They got a pair of ears on a normal condition, a pair of eyes, one mouth, 2 arms on a normal condition, and walk upright. And what makes you better than me if I can think? Nothing at all. It's just a pseudo feeling of superiority. It's not real. It's pseudo. It's false. So I rebel against that. And because I had come through so much stuff. I wasn't going by what somebody told me. Yes, I studied literature and I studied poetry and all of that, and I know about that. But I had come through the struggle myself against great odds and made it. And, you know, nobody can take that away from me.
Is there a formula, you know, for example, there are a lot of people that have had trials and tribulations. A lot of people have witnessed all kinds of insults, all kinds of brutality, discrimination. They choose a different route. Sometimes people choose to be violent, to take out violence for violence. But you chose a different route. So why did you choose the education route and the protest route as opposed to just saying I'm gonna get even with these people for what they've done to me and my people? What made
Well,
you go
my
into
daddy
that?
was a very religious person, and he would read the Bible to us. And when I got old enough, I started reading it. I realized what they did to a perfect man who was Jesus Christ. And I know I'm imperfect, and I'm not as half as good as he is. And I follow the philosophy of people like Martin Luther King and many, many others that was good people, just wanted to lubricate the wheels of government and leadership so that they would run smooth for everybody. So I guess you could call it, I was a dreamer, and still is. And that was the drive, and so something was pushing. You know, when you come from the bottom and move, there's something drives you, some kind of nicety that you see situation and you know they're wrong, and if you don't say something about them or try to change them, they will always be that way. I refuse to accept stuff. Not that I could do anything about it at that time, but as time went by, and as I grew older, got more education, and met more people of influence, and now in the Senate for 27 years, I've seen somewhat a metamorphosis of effort to make things better for somebody else. And I think sometimes we say, well, you know, you got to look after yourself first. No, life is about what you do for other folks, because your blessing is wrapped up in it, and I believe that.
If you had to, near the end, if you had to leave something for the next generation, statement, whatever, I know you've done books, you've done your service. If the legal services and the league had not existed, what kind of place would Greenwood look like today? And where would we be had you not had these organizations, had you not and others engaged in bringing about this change?
I don't know what might have been. I don't know. But I have a statement that I will leave with these young people. And mine is this: I will not allow ignorant prejudices and hatreds to write my epitaph. Epitaph, as you know, is the inscription on the grave. So in order to not allow that, you got consequences. Many consequences. You can look at my home now, even though it's a brick house, but there are bullet holes in it where people shot in there. I've had pictures of vehicles that I've owned, all the glass is knocked out, and a letter in there was tied to brick saying, "Nigger, you're never equal to that of a white man, and unless you stop your stuff, we're going to have another holiday for you like they had for Martin Luther King." But that made me angry. It didn't frighten me. So I went and bought, I know my wife will never fired a weapon, but I went and bought two 30-06. They cost about $800 with scopes on them. I laid out from my home nights waiting for anybody else to try that. Didn't try it anymore. Okay?
So you're nonviolent, but you also believe in self-defense, though.
Of course.
Good.
That's good sense. Oh, you know, and then when I made a lot of speeches at the Capitol that maybe people didn't appreciate, thought was way out of line. But that's my life. I've always been outspoken, but I tried to be right on the issues. Just tried to be right. Do justly, love mercy, and walk humbly with our God. That's Micah 6th chapter 8th verse. How can you love mercy if you don't love people?
On that note, thank you, Senator.
You bet.